months now. I'm glad you remembered that we're here and that we actually, I think we're going on maybe 7 years of doing these book studies. And we've done all of the uh, people that I'm sure that our guest Cameron McColl knows many of them. I'm going to introduce Cameron in just a minute. And first, I want to just give you a little background on him. He's from Scotland. He's not there right now, but he's from Scotland. He grew up there. He published the Gospel of Thomas according to Thomas, an interpretation in 2015, with a note on the cover from someone who has loved Jesus from an early age. And that really sings to my heart too, because I really started my path with a love for Jesus from the Bible, and that's always stayed with me and many of us. And he acknowledges Ramana Maharshi, Da Free John, Francis Lucille, Robert Adams, and others, with another note from Cameron that his intention throughout this book has simply been to express what comes to him as lucidly and safely as possible, using whosever words or teachings appear to resonate in the context. And Cameron is a board member with Science and Non-Duality, which tells us he has a broad understanding for the non-dual science, philosophy, and teachings that we're all interested in, and a bit of a Bible background, which also pleases me because it's where my beginning was before I thought this thing is off. And I love where he has in the book, imagine my surprise when I saw all these highlighted passages captured in one book. And I just want to give a warm welcome to Cameron McColl and thank you for being our guest and also the author of this awesome piece of work. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you, Bill. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about this subject that I love, and answer any questions you have or tell you more about the path that led me here, and whatever's helpful for you.
Thank you, Cameron. Well, what I thought we would do, I have a few questions for you, and I have invited our guests. We have a book study group that fluctuates from 50 people to several hundred. And it looks like we have a fair amount of people that are joining us already today. And what I'd love to hear from you, and also for you guys that are here watching, you're welcome to put your hand up if you have a particular question for Cameron, and if he's in the middle of saying something or speaking, or there's more than one hand up, just be patient, and we'll get to you, and we'll try to get to all the hands before we leave, as long as it doesn't go past 75 minutes. And I'm just gonna, as I was reading your intro of your book, I loved the part where imagine to my surprise. And so I'd like to hear from you since you're right here. What was that like?
Well, it was remarkable, actually. The story went that I was a young kid, 15, 16, I think I was, looking for answers to the big questions in life, trying to figure out who I was, what was real, what does it mean to be alive, what does it mean to die, and this is pre-internet, pre-fax machines, pre-everything, and so the only book that I had available to me to look at was the Bible. And so I did, and I I was pretty serious about this at the time, and I think I read the whole book cover to cover probably 3 times, and some of it, just felt, especially a lot of the Old Testament was just like, I'm not getting this, But in the New Testament, there were certain paragraphs and phrases and sayings that just resonated with me, and I thought, yes, that's true, and I knew it was true. I couldn't tell you why I knew, but it felt right to me. And I sort of mentally highlighted these various phrases and passages and parables and so on that I had read. And I did this multiple times. And years later, when I stumbled over the Gospel of Thomas, when I had already been a student of Francis Lucille's for a number of years, actually, it was a kind of a revelation, because it contained within it basically everything that I had mentally highlighted as a child, and nothing that I hadn't, which was interesting. And that kind of made sense to me, because the Gnostic Gospels, around the time about 100 years after the life of Jesus, the Bible was being put together. They were taking various books, they were discarding others, and they decided what was going to be in and what wasn't. And in fact, the books that they decided would not be in, those churches and those teachings were persecuted. And they had to, and in fact, the Gospel of Thomas is part of the Nag Hammadi library that was dug up in Egypt and had been hidden away all that time ago. And so I think there was a lot of modification of these books that went on. And so this struck me as something which was original and pure and spoke to the truth of what had happened back then. Because, like a lot of people, I went through the question as a young man, is the Bible a divinely inspired document? In other words, is every word of it true, right? And I actually came to the conclusion, no, it's not. It's a historical record, and it's got some truth in it and some stuff that's not true. And so anyway, that's what happened, and it kind of confirmed in me my the relationship that I felt with Jesus.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I don't know how that fits, because Jesus, it's like, have I fallen in love with the figure in my heart? Because Jesus is not separate from me, and yet somehow he continues to have a voice in time and space through many different channels, and it happens hundreds, if not thousands of times in different ways. And there are many here that have this this intimate love for Jesus, don't have a interest in the Bible, but there's his voice that comes through, that's true. It resonates, and that has to be true, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you can feel, and I think the Thomas Jefferson, he has his version of the New Testament. It's called the Thomas New Testament, and he had his favorite things that he thought were true in the New Testament. And I would imagine, if you compared that, I haven't looked at that in over a dozen years, but I bet you if you looked at the things that he highlighted, it would probably line up with many of the sayings that are in the Gospel of Thomas.
Yes, yes. I mean, what's interesting about it is, there is no resurrection. There is no rolling away of the stone. Many of the things that are kind of like the big ticket items for Christianity are not there. And that's because, well, I think they're unnecessary, actually. And I think that, we live in an apparent reality. It's not the ultimate reality. There is a certain apparent reality to this existence. And I see no reason why it cannot be in a many layered apparent reality. And so I think I see no conflict um, and I see no problem um, with teaching and instruction and love coming in the form of Jesus or the Buddha or any other deity for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. It does cause me to to have a question about, there when you say there's no in the gospel in the gospel of according to Thomas, there's no resurrection, there's no rolling of the stone, there's no miracles and per se. And what about those things? How do you even try to reconcile those important missing components?
Well, I think that the problem with contemporary Christianity is it tends to take things literally. But if one wants to look at things as metaphors, the exposure of our true nature as love or truth or beauty or consciousness could be looked upon as a metaphor, for example. To me, it doesn't matter whether it's there or not. I can see its usefulness for some people, but what's important to me is my actual experience, and I have experienced the presence of Jesus in my life, and I have experienced perhaps even more strongly what one might call grace, which I think is absolutely sacred and is real in my experience. And so I honor that, and I'm humble in the face of that. And I see it as an expression of that which we all are and which we share, which we could call love, truth, beauty, consciousness, God.
Well, would you say that before I ask the question I was just going to ask, um, is this experience of grace in your life akin to living uh, an awakened experience? What we feel the pointing of Buddha, Jesus, Ramana. Is it that like this grace? Could you say it's almost like an awakeness that's ongoing, that's lived in the person we call Cameron?
I think when I first experienced it, I didn't know, perhaps I misinterpreted it, but it felt intimate and powerful, graceful, and loving. And later, when I had learned a little bit more about my own true nature, I saw that there was no difference or separation between my experience of grace and that let's say being in that more natural state of clarity, if you like. In other words, when you have to be very careful when you talk about awake or enlightenment, right?
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. In fact, I think the words enlightened and human being should probably not be in the same sentence.
Although the awakeness, I call it awakening awareness. It's when the true nature begins to come online and it begins to modify the experience that the body mind has
yes.
in a way that you just described as, and I love the description of grace. I love also the use of the word clarity. because it has it's a very soft, also intimate, and it feels like a very permanent experience of something that's we haven't been familiar with, but is now a new container.
Yeah, yeah. I think what happens is that it's our natural state. Um, it's just that it takes a long time sometimes for the mind to become quiet and to understand that it has no access to that state. Um, and so only when the mind surrenders in the full knowledge that this is not something you can own, control, have, right? In other words, it's a state of full surrender. And only when you get that like deeply, then you discover that you're already in this place that you were trying to find.
That's so funny that I mean it's not funny if you're still seeking it and it's fleeting or if you haven't tasted or glimpsed it or it, you're it's not funny for that, but it is funny that it all of a sudden it reveals itself and you realize that it's somehow it's always been there and it takes you into a deeper experience than you could ever have imagined.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I mean, I was remarkably fortunate in that, like you, I studied the Bible. I felt Jesus in my life. I had a relationship with Jesus. But then I left the church because I thought the church didn't get it, right? And I wandered for years just trying to figure all this stuff out on my own. And I learned later on that I'd understood quite a lot just by staring up at the sky. And but it was and I lived in a place where there wasn't a lot of books about this thing. There weren't any other people to talk to, nothing like that. But I eventually met a friend, and he started giving me some books to read. He had been a sannyasin. He'd been with Osho in India. And I read a book by a guy called Dafri John called The Knee of Listening, which came out in the 70s. And it was very influential on me. And I thought this was a beautiful book. And I thought this was amazing because there is a sage who is alive in the world today, because I thought they were all dead, died a long time ago, right? And but then I was very disappointed because as his subsequent books came out, his name got longer and longer, and there were more and more capital letters, and I felt very disillusioned. so then I just turned my back on it all, and then one day, this other friend of mine said there was this guy coming to the UK who he thought was the real deal. It was really an awake person, or someone we could learn from, and his name was Francis Lucille. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's go see him. And so I turned up at this little pottery barn, sort of farm in Shropshire, which was owned by Rupert Spira. And Rupert had just met Francis, I think, 3 weeks earlier or 4 weeks earlier for the first time, and had invited him to host a retreat in his house. And so we all turned up. I think there's probably about 10 or 15 people. And I had never sat in front of a teacher before. I didn't know the protocol, at all. And but anyway, we all started firing questions at Francis, and it was a remarkable experience because one half of my brain was going, "This is absolutely right." Like I already knew the answer, but I couldn't quite join the words together. But as soon as he said it, I knew that it was true. I could join the dots. And the other half of my brain is going, this is really going to screw up my life, and because it did change my life completely. And so that was the beginning. But then followed 20 years really of, and at the beginning, every retreat, I just cried my eyes out, the tears just wouldn't stop. And I thought they would never stop. I don't know why they were there. I didn't but eventually they stopped. I don't know why they came. I don't know why they stopped, but they did. But and I had questions and questions, questions. But eventually, after a long, long time, the questions, there just weren't any more questions. And the mind, eventually just became quiet.
That's a beautiful story, and I connect a few dots when you talk about Francis coming and Rupert's barn, and we're probably both familiar. I mean, I know we're both familiar with the barn burning
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
That must have been prior to the barn burning down?
it was. Yeah, there were several retreats there before then, and in fact, I was there the day after the barn burned down, and we helped clear out all the pots and cleared the place up. And a friend gave us the use of their place for that retreat a few miles down the road.
Wow, wow. Well, it's nice to have that bit of backstory. How long after that did you discover the gospel according to Thomas?
Oh, quite a long time, probably another. I mean, when I wrote, let's see, I wrote the book in, was it 2016? I probably discovered it about 2012, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so was Rupert just at the tail end of leaving France, starting out on his own then, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or the beginning of
Actually,
starting out
he,
on his own.
yeah, I was living, I have a business down in the Caribbean, and I was living down there. And Rupert came down to visit, and he was just starting out teaching. And we got together for a week and we wrote him a kind of a business plan. and and I guess not very long after that, I started writing the book. Yeah. But I
Oh,
didn't do
wow.
it to write a book, actually. I was just interested. Um, and so I did one verse a day generally. And what would happen is I would read the verse in the morning, I'd contemplate it for 24 hours. And then the next morning, usually I would know what to write, and I wrote it down. And I just did it for my own enjoyment. And it was only, months and months later that I decided to, because somebody said I should turn it into a book, so I did.
Right. Nice. Well, the world thanks you for it because it is and it does to approach it from an Advaita, a non-dual um, perspective is to unpack what I think was the real teaching of Jesus.
Mhm.
It does it has a nice ring to it. I'm super happy that Jenny Beal, who is here, hi Jenny. I'm super happy that she recommended this book for us because there's many that come to the non-dual, to the path of understanding in different ways that have a background in Christianity or some kind of, connection with Jesus. So it's nice, it's very refreshing to have it come from a place of, right, like it sounds like you don't have an attachment to any of those stories of the Bible being true or not,
No,
because it's brought you to a place where the essence of the of the of what Jesus came to share is it's working. We're only
yeah,
2,000 years later, and it's actually working.
yes, exactly, exactly. That's right. Um, I yeah, I mean, I don't mind if the other stories are true or not, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the but what speaks to me are these expressions, and these are the ones that resonate with me, and that I think, yes, I understand what you were trying to say, and I think parables, they're such a good way of teaching because they're so easy to remember in a culture that doesn't use the written word much, right? And so I think stories are a wonderful way to teach. Um, and and some of the things that he says are almost like koans. they're quite cryptic,
Yeah.
and so they leave you like, what does that mean, right?
Yes.
And then you have to think about it a little bit, and then you go, oh yes, he means this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this I was going to ask you, do you have do you have favorite sayings or metaphors or I took a note of the ones that are parables with symbols
Mhm.
and there's I don't know there's about six or eight of them, but do you have a favorite story, a parable that sort of points to the potency of the teaching?
Not really, not really. No. What happens is
Yeah.
that depending on the circumstances of my life, sometimes different stories or sayings of his pop into my head. Similarly, things that Francis has said or Ramana Maharshi has said or Robert Adams said, um, they pop into my mind sometimes as like exemplifying that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. But the the thing that sort of I think the thing that I'm really I'm not disappointed in it, but I yeah, a lot of people would love for the miracles to be true and for us to, to wake up and to and to always have a perfect health and body and then just die, then just go to sleep.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me wonder, were the miracles true? Do you
Yes.
think because it seems like Buddha had a place of awakeness that was a big teaching and still is.
Yes. Yeah.
Ramana, or Jesus definitely had that place, but he also did miracles. He cured the lepers and he made the blind. And I don't know if the making the blind see was seeing as consciousness, seeing, knowing the self, or if it was
Mhm.
actually making the visual cortex to be able to see. And then, of course, Ramana, he had abilities and other sages that we don't know of that aren't so famous. But Ramana, he could look in devotees' eyes. It was ripe and ready, and they would have a full Kensho awakening experience,
Yeah.
according to
Yes.
the reports.
Yes. Um, I think, I mean, like, why not? You know, um, the it seems to me that, the universe really enjoys putting on a good show. And I mean, look at a telescope. I mean, look at the galaxies and look at the nebulae and look at the endless vistas of space. I mean, there's miracles all around us. Um, I find the very fact that there is something rather than nothing probably to be the ultimate miracle, actually, right?
Right. Yes.
We get hung
Yeah.
up on miracles because it's like, oh, that's unusual. That's different from the normal, right? And fine, why not? But actually, we're surrounded by miracles. The very fact that existence occurs, that it happens, is a miracle. And so I feel, and this isn't just like woo woo stuff. Like I genuinely feel that to be alive as a human being in this world is extraordinarily precious. And I give thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and
There's,
you know and also I would say, if you think about it, because it takes a lot to really come to the perspective that what we have is appearance. It's not the ultimate reality. Even time and space are appearances in this greater whole. And so it's a bit like a big production movie, and the producer, he likes special effects, right? Uh, it's a great performance. So if miracles, sure, why not? If you feel like it.
yeah. Yeah. I don't like to like to refer to there being a he. I'd rather it be a it and it in
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah. Well, any
and
gender you like, you know.
yeah. The interesting what's interesting about this the context of what we're talking about is that none of those things what's out there actually doesn't even though it's beautiful and it's awesome, what makes us appreciate what that beauty is and to experience that and to call it grace and to call it amazing is that it is once we know that we are of that or
Mhm.
what we are is also that, that
Yes,
brings it into a relationship of context, it seems.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's the most wonderful thing to discover, actually, um, is that you're less than you thought you were and more than you thought you were, right?
Yes.
Uh, and so, you know, neither did you do really bad things, really, as a person, neither did you do good things, right? Um, but you exist, and you are not other than that, and that's a remarkable thing to conclude, um, and it brings great peace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everything's okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of what happens, right?
Yeah. Several of the sayings discuss the concept of the true self, the inner transformation. Uh, what would you say is the suggestion in the sayings that that points someone to discover that experience?
Well, you know, a lot of the sayings are about suffering, right? And my conclusion is that suffering is one of the universe's favorite teaching tools. Um, and you know, you're invited to bang your head against the wall as many times as you would like. The invitation to get the lesson is always there, right? So, so I think I think the primary call of Jesus' teachings and of these sayings is to waken up and to understand the reality of your own true nature, who you truly are. Um, you know what dies, and what was never born will never die, and what was born was never alive, right? In that sense,
Yeah.
I think that's his primary teaching. His primary teaching is understand who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't the miracles. It never, I have always felt that it was never the miracles.
Yeah.
Not always, but after I found A Course in Miracles and then the non-dual, the direct path, I realized that it was never the miracles. It was definitely, that's kind of a distraction, actually.
Yes.
The miracles are a distraction from the pointing, which is to know the
Yes.
self in my mind.
Yes. I think that's right, and it's the same with, for example, you know, if you're a student on the path of trying to understand the true nature of things and of yourself. Um, and sometimes, you know, people have big ticket experiences, right? You know, and, you know, I mean, I've had such experiences, right? And they're beautiful, but they have a beginning and an end. And therefore, they are not it, right? They're a kind of a glimpse, they're an insight, but I think the key to them is not to get too hung up on them. Um, and you know, they can be informative and beautiful, um, but they it would be a mistake to start trying to pursue those experiences in and of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions. If anyone would like to raise their hand and ask Cameron any questions. And Cameron, before we take the questions, I just want to ask you one last thing. For those that are really wanting to contemplate some of these things, how would you suggest that they approach
Mm.
just a sort of um, a relationship with these sayings and this book?
I think I would suggest to go slowly. Um, don't rush. Just you can go them in sequence if you want, or just open at random, um, and look at something and see if it touches you in some way, and just contemplate it for a while and see what comes, and then continue. But it's I think, I mean, because that was how I read it, right? And that's how it touched me. And I think that's quite a good way to do it.
Okay, good, good. Well, let's bring Barbara up. Barbara, would you like to ask Cameron a question?
Hi, Barbara.
Yeah. Hi, Cameron. Thank you very much for your book. I've read it for years. It's always been on my shelf, so it's very good. Um, on their verse 80 is the one that I've always, picked up because it says to recognize the world is to know that manifestation, the physical universe, here called the body, has no independent existence, no life of its own. It and all life within it are emanated for a time, but by life itself. The one who understands this knows his true identity to be that which gives rise to that very emanating life force. That's the one verse. And I was the same as you. I read the Bible. I had very Christian people around me, like cult Christians. And
Right.
I kind of just stepped away and went into my own world on it and asked questions and found out that really Jesus, Buddha, all of them state the same thing. They're kind of like
Yeah.
the Hindu puja,
Exactly.
it's the
Yeah.
time to use it, but it's to find the deeper true nature self.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this statement really opened up to me
Mm-hmm.
that is where I learned not to non-duality. And the reason through that is you can never be separated from life itself.
Right.
And it just clicked. And it's like I've never felt alone ever,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
It just took me right into the true nature of that I am life itself. And when I look at another, the grace in that is they are too. All things are a leaf in a tree, all of it. And I don't
That's
have
right.
to make it, hoogie googie. It's just the reality of recognizing that most all teachings are just puja. It's just a way to point home if you
Yeah.
use it that way. And I think just relaxing into it. So, and this verse really helped me identify that I can never be alone because I can't be separate from life itself. I can't be. There's
No.
nothing. I'm in it, and that's it. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, how could we communicate if we were not part of the same reality, right? Um, and I think what you say is true. I think where it gets tested is when the guy you're looking at is is not a nice person, right? Um, where you have conflict, where you have wars, where you have suffering. Um, when you can see this is true in all of these circumstances, in everything, then um, then you can see real peace. Um, Ironically, in fact, in order to be compassionate, you almost have to be able to see things with this clarity, right? Um, and But I agree with you, and I think that it's beautifully said in this verse. Um, It's very succinct, and it's true. You know, that person, you know, to recognize the world, as I wrote, you know, to recognize the world is to know that manifestation, the physical universe, here called the body, has no independent existence, no life of its own. It and all the life within it are animated for a time by life itself. And the one who understands this knows his or her true identity to be that which gives rise to that animating force. And I think that's the truth of things, right? Yeah. So I agree with you.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you for
it sure
writing
is.
that.
Yeah, that's just a thank you for that, and I loved. I mean, when you really read it in its full context, and what it's saying is that in the transformation experience, everything is this experience. Everything is understanding the oneness of all things. And it's just beautifully stated in that paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Susan Wright, would you
Unmute. I think I am.
There you are.
Hi,
Hi.
hi, Bill. Hi, Cameron. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. Cameron, if I have a more general question, not related to a particular verse in here. So if this question is too far afield, please feel free to say, not now. So I was raised quite Catholic and gone through a long journey. My question is about faith. And I've wondered, in your experience, if your experience of faith has changed through your levels and your journeys from, you know, quite Christian now through to the direct path. It's something that has occurred to me recently, and I'm still contemplating it because something I think has shifted for me, but I'm not sure how. And I wondered if you had some perspective on that yourself.
I think it has changed somewhat because I've changed. When I was a young guy, you know, faith to me, it referred to something that was other than me, right? So to have faith was to sort of to trust. It was a little childlike, actually. And I think it had truth at its essence, but it was not fully understood. And I think later on, it became clearer to me what was being referred to. It's rather like, you know, in the Old Testament, you've got the 10 Commandments, right? Very basic rules about how to live. And then later on, you get a description of love and treat thy neighbor as thyself, and a degree of subtlety to the instruction about how we should live. It's a little bit the same. You start off with something a little bit crude and basic, but then gradually it gets refined and becomes clearer. So I think the essence was true at the very beginning, but greater clarity came later on. Does that make sense?
It does. It refers to that shift that I'm also experiencing as well, and maybe it's a clarity, because to have faith in or about something is rather dualistic, and as you say, you know, to have faith in God, there's separation immediately. So this is a different context now. I was just thank you very much for your perspective.
Yes. You know, it's a funny thing, right? But when the thought first occurs to you, oh, you know, I and God are not separate, right? That seems, and then there's this claim by many people, and I know that couldn't possibly be true. It's actually egotistical. It's actually egoistic to claim separation, right? its identity, clinging on, right?
Yeah.
When things are really clearly seen, there truly is no me, right?
Yeah.
There's the appearance. There's an appearance, but
there's the appearance. Yeah, exactly. Thank you
there's
very
only
much.
one.
Yeah,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan and Cameron. And it seems like faith almost gets replaced with knowing. With faith becomes it doesn't apply any longer when
Yeah.
recognition is dawning on consciousness. Faith it doesn't even apply.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's right. One of the signs that you've, kind of, or I'll speak for myself. If you find yourself thinking in those terms, it's a sign that you've forgotten something, and that you need to go back and just wait a minute. Hang on. This is not. This is not reality. And old habits die hard sometimes, and you find yourself sometimes in an old habit, and then you recognize it. You go, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Oh yes, of course, because.
Oh yes, of course. Light's been turned on. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That was the old paradigm, which
Mhm.
is true. I mean, really is true for most of us that are, most of the men and women that are in this book study and that in my world I would say most are over 30 and probably most are over 50. And it's like life is becoming a whole different experience. And spirituality, has replaced religion for a lot of us.
Yes.
Because and it has an intimate connection with our being, and somehow we just know this just is right.
Yeah. Yes, I think we learn, if we're interested. I feel that, we talked about grace a little before. I think one of the manifestations of grace, if you like, is the invitation to understand our true nature, which is always there. We can reject the invitation, and it's presented again later. And for many years, I after I sort of stepped away from the Bible and I walked on a little bit, sort of contemplating and thinking, and then I became, a dad, a husband, a worker. For a long time, I just had my head down, just working. I wasn't thinking about much of this. Every so often, I would wander out into the sunshine and look up at the sky and wonder about things, and then just get sidetracked again. And it was later, when there was just a little bit of availability and a little bit of space, that I was able to return to these big questions that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have another hand up. Tim, would you like to come on and ask Cameron whatever you would like to say?
Hello, Tim.
Thank you for being here.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Yep.
Tim.
Yes.
Yep, we hear you.
Hello. This is a lovely book. Thank you so much for this, and thank you for this meeting too. I first came across this gospel back in the 70s, and I found a copy back then, read it, and sort of got to a situation where I thought, I can't really understand this. Quite a strong Christian background, I guess I had, and but I didn't, I at that time, young chap, didn't really have the time in my life, if you like, to ask the questions. What is it about? So you mentioned that a lot of it is quite cryptic, and I guess in a lot of ways that cryptic nature of it put me off. So really, it's lovely to see your interpretation of these things, which are like, oh yeah, that's it. I mean, Bill was talking about light bulb moments. Well, perhaps not the same sort of light bulb moment, but still, yeah, this is really, I just get this, you know. I've been involved with non-dualist stuff since the 70s. So can you say more about the cryptic nature of it? Do you think it's a linguistic thing, or is it a way of keeping a teaching secret, or is it, I mean, or is it just that that's the way people spoke in those days?
Well, so a few things. So, you know, I've always liked poetry. I like poetry. I like the efficient use of language. I'm drawn to that. So, so I like densely packed meaning in words. I just enjoy it, right? I think in the case of Jesus, he certainly wasn't trying to hide the teaching. No, his mission was to communicate as clearly as he could his message, as loudly and as powerfully as he could. That's definitely what he was trying to do.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the life of Jesus compared to Buddha or other teachers, you know, it was short and explosive, right? You know, he made a big bang and he wasn't around for very long and then it was over, right? And so he was definitely on a mission, you know. And so I think he was trying to speak clearly as he could. There was, teaching was done in a different way then. Certainly it was done by stories and parables. And as I said before, there wasn't wide use of the written word. I think he was trying to speak as clearly as he could. We have to remember the world that his disciples lived in, his followers lived in, and the terms of reference that they were used to, and the ways in which they were able to understand things. So he tried to use terms that were familiar to them. I mean, he tried to use language and twist it in such a way that he could communicate a new meaning that they had not heard before. And that's not easy to do, you know. And then also, as I said before, you want it to be remembered and carried down through probably a verbal tradition. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I sometimes, you know, I've read sort of academic texts going over the phrases of the Bible, you know, at great length. And I know these people were well-meaning and so on, but I just think, like, you don't understand anything, you know? And I feel sorry for them because they've obviously put a lot of time and effort into this, you know? But they just haven't got it at all. So the nice thing about these teachings is that they might be a little bit cryptic, but they're absolutely available to anybody. You know, no special knowledge required, no academic training required, other than the ability to read. So that's my take on it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tim, for that question and also your answer, Cameron. It feels like, you know, in my mind that the metaphors and the parables also, they have this this quiet kind of or backdoor kind of a access to pause the mind or still it because it can't really connect the dots so fast, but the true self, it resonates and it comes in through a different access point.
Yeah, I mean, Francis often says in his retreats that the teaching happens under anesthetic.
So, and these are sort of anesthetical.
In a sense, you know, the teaching
element.
comes in through the door, you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we have the woman that we all love and adore, and she's also a friend of yours and suggested the book, Jenny Beal. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Cameron. Hi,
Yeah.
Bill.
Hi.
I just wanted to share something about number 48 because, you know, Cameron, I've had this book a little while, quite a number of years. It was recommended to me by Ellen, actually Ellen Emmett. And I first read it when I was studying with Rupert. And number 48, at that time, I used Rupert's idealist interpretation of that, which is, well, your interpretation kind of is in between idealism and realism, which I think is perfect. But that was how I saw it, that this one house, the mind, in other words, everything is mind. The two make peace with each other. So instead of seeing an outside world, we say everything is mind, and ultimately reality is mind. But then later, reading the book again, after it came to Francis, that in fact, really, in a way, what brought me to Francis was the understanding that non-duality doesn't imply idealism. It doesn't imply everything is made out of mind. And then I saw it in a very different way. The two make peace with each other. And sometimes Francis talks about a physical realm and what appears to be outside of me, and the mental realm, what appears to be inside of me, and that there's a common reality which is common to both of them.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
That reality is consciousness, ultimate perceiver. So I just wondered what you felt about those two different interpretations.
I like them both. I'm looking at it just now.
It's 48,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
48.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
make peace with each other in this one house. They will say to
Yeah.
the mountain, move away, and it will move away. And that applies in both of those interpretations.
Absolutely. I'm gonna, if I may, I'll read what I wrote then, and then we can talk about it a little, because it probably expresses it the best way I can think of. But anyway, so what I said was, out of nothing more than a series of perceptions, we make a world, and we call it reality. And we give primacy to this world, and secondary reality to the consciousness, which actually gives rise to the perceptions. These perceptions, out of which we make a world, are nothing other than consciousness itself, and we are nothing other than that. And when this is seen, when these apparently separate aspects of reality are seen as one reality, when the two make peace with each other in this one house, then the insubstantial nature of the world is also seen, and they can say to the mountain, move away, and it will move away. And so, and that is how I see it. In other words, another way to say it would be, there's no conflict between this inner world and this outer world. It's remarkable in a way that we live in a world of mentations inside our head, and we transition seamlessly between this reality and this reality, right? And yet no one other than me has access to this reality, right? And no one other than you has access to the reality going on in your head. And yet somehow we communicate, we move seamlessly between these domains, and there must be, and there is a common ground to them, which is what was being described here.
And equally, there's, I mean, it's obvious that we can't know anything of the outside, so-called outside world, other than what comes in through our senses. But what is so beautiful is that there is still the possibility that there may be something completely different there, really, as Don Hoffman describes in in his theory, he says that we can't know how things are. We have this kind of headset which interprets the world in a way that's convenient for our body minds to carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
at the same time, what there may be is this beautiful network of conscious agents, which ultimately are just one, so interconnected. Ultimately, they combine together into one reality. And I think it's a very beautiful interpretation. I think it's an equally good interpretation.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's important to recognize, and this is an important part of his theory, is that we experience our perceptions, right?
Yeah.
We don't actually experience the outside world. We experience our perceptions. So we only ever experience perceptions, right?
Exactly. And however the outside world may be in reality is purely a matter of speculation and modeling. Science can model it in so many different ways, and it does.
Yes. What's beautiful is that these apparently separate realities can communicate and appear to cohabit in the same space.
Yeah.
And allow us to come together and join together. You know, one of the stumbling blocks for a lot of people is the apparent irreconcilable gulf between the apparently separate multiplicity and the oneness of consciousness. And the mind has a lot of questions that need to be asked about that and need to be settled and come to peace before there can be clarity around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Jenny, for suggesting this book, and thank you, Cameron, for kicking off our book study. We're going to be 24 weeks. We're going to look at 5 sayings each time we join together. We're going to have conversations like this, and we would love to have you come back and visit us again. It was wonderful having your input. It was just huge, and thank you so much.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye
Thank
now.
you, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you next week for sayings 1 through 5. And